The First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, has said the Scottish Government will use its powers to keep pace with EU standards in areas under Holyrood's control. Speaking in Brussels, Ms Sturgeon said doing so would make it easier for Scotland to return to the EU as an independent country. A warning that our chief political correspondent Glenn Campbell's package contains flash photography.
Brexit talks at breakfast time with the EU's chief negotiator, Michel Barnier. Nicola Sturgeon wants him to know that the Scottish Government wants the closest possible future relationship with the EU and with its single market.
One of the big fears I have and big concerns is that we have a UK government now that is demanding regulatory divergence, and that can only mean one thing. It can only mean a race to the bottom on some of these vital protections that matter so much to people.
Now, Boris Johnson has said the UK will maintain high standards, but given her doubts about that, the First Minister wants Holyrood to at least match the EU on environmental protection and in other areas under devolved control. And she says that would make it easier for Scotland to return to EU membership if it becomes an independent country. That independence vision was projected onto the EU Commission's headquarters building in Brussels on Brexit Day, apparently at the SNP's behest, and it seems to have raised eyebrows inside the Commission.
We are not in the business of being requested or granting authorisations for people from outside for projecting messages on our building.
At a Brussels briefing this afternoon, Nicola Sturgeon renewed her commitment to holding another referendum on independence.
That's my plan A, B and C. I think ultimately this is a democratic issue that should be resolved democratically and politically.
And she was asked about the impact of independence on Scotland's border with England.
It's not independence that threatens borders, it's Brexit that does that. It's the approach to Brexit that has been taken. One of the reasons why I'll continue to argue for the relationship to be as close as possible. But obviously when we see where the UK-EU relationship ends up, then I can work out, the Scottish Government can work out how we mitigate that.
At the Scottish Government's office in Brussels in recent days, they've advertised their desire to keep the EU close. But much more details required on how that might be achieved through independence.
Glenn joins me now. You say more detail is required. When are we likely to get it?
Well, I'm not sure about the exact timescale, but Nicola Sturgeon did say today that the Scottish Government would set out in frank detail how it proposes to secure independent membership of the EU, and the border question would be a key part of that, because if Scotland was to be in the EU and its single market and England and Wales was outside, perhaps moving further away from EU rules, it would be reasonably expected that in those circumstances there would need to be checks on goods crossing that border. So that's a key issue to be addressed. Of course, Nicola Sturgeon has another key issue to address, and that is trying to secure a referendum. There's no prospect of one in the immediate future, at least not one agreed with the UK government, which is resistant to that. At the weekend, some in the SNP, like Joanna Cherry, the MP, suggested Holyrood should be ready to put through its own referendum bill and defend that in the courts if necessary. Nicola Sturgeon said today that while she hasn't ruled out testing the legality of that, she thought her party would be better building the case for independence. Of course, her political opponents would prefer if she parked independence altogether and focused on Holyrood issues like the NHS and education.
Well, speaking about Holyrood issues, she lost her finance secretary last week. Was she saying anything more about that?
Well, she confirmed today that she has not had any approach from the police about Derek Mackay's online activities, which led to his resignation. She also said that she was shocked and stunned to learn about his behaviour, and that any suggestion she had prior knowledge or concern was an attempt to smear her. She says that the first she knew of it was when it was reported in the press.
OK, thank you, Glenn.